It started as a sacred Sunday morning. The kind where stained glass windows glow with sunrise, where voices rise in unison, where hands are lifted in praise. But within 15 seconds, joy turned to horror when a single gunshot echoed through the sanctuary, and a woman crumpled to the church floor, eyes wide, mouth open, and blood staining her floral dress as her son stood over her, silent, cold, and still gripping the smoking weapon in front of a stunned congregation, and a frozen pastor who could only whisper "Dear God" before chaos erupted. This wasn't a story from some war-torn land or a gang-infested alley. This was the Heartland, a small Indiana town where everyone knew everyone and no one could believe that Eli Thornton, the quiet, respectful 19-year-old who played drums in the youth choir, had just shot his own mother point-blank during a worship service with more than 70 witnesses in the pews. This was no accident, no sudden act of rage. It was calculated, chilling, and hauntingly silent before the scream of the choir director pierced the air and shattered the illusion that any place was safe from evil. If you're watching this, don't look away, because what happens next will leave you breathless as we unravel the haunting truth behind why a son turned the Lord's house into a crime scene that still echoes with unanswered questions and tears. And before we're done, you'll understand how justice found its way through the darkest sermon ever delivered in this quiet town. So stay with us and make sure you subscribe, because this is just the beginning of a story you'll never forget. Eli had always been described as shy, almost too quiet for his age, the kind of boy who always helped his mother carry him books to the car and never spoke back. His father, Raymond Thornton, a deacon at Everlight Church, had raised Eli with strict discipline and a firm hand, while Margaret Thornton, the woman whose life he would one day end, was the picture of grace, always smiling, always serving, always leading women's prayer groups and Sunday school without fail. The town adored her, and that morning she stood at the pulpit introducing the week's sermon titled "The Power of Forgiveness," with a radiant smile, never knowing that her son was seated in the third pew, his hand tucked into the inside pocket of his jacket, where a loaded .38 revolver waited quietly for a moment no one could have imagined. And when she said the words, "No matter what someone has done to you are called to forgive," Eli stood up slowly, his hand trembling only slightly, and within seconds he raised the weapon and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out louder than the organ ever had, and Margaret's body fell with a sound no one ever forgets. Not the choir, not the children in Sunday school, not the elderly couple visiting from out of town, and definitely not Pastor Wilkins, who had to kneel beside the body of a woman he'd known since she was 12, asking God why this had happened in his house. 90 seconds have passed, and if you're still watching, click subscribe, because we're only scratching the surface of the chilling truth behind Eli's motive and the unspoken pain buried deep in the Thornton household. The police arrived within 5 minutes, but the damage was already eternal. Eli did not resist arrest. He didn't run, he didn't cry, he didn't even speak. Just stared at his mother's body, as if waiting for her to rise and say she forgave him. And in the days that followed, the investigation revealed a story darker than anyone expected. Margaret had been loved by the community. Yes, but behind closed doors, she was deeply controlling, emotionally manipulative, and according to Eli's private journal discovered during the investigation, she had used religion as a weapon to shame, silence, and psychologically torment her only son. Ever since he was a child, Eli's journal was filled with entries describing a home that looked perfect from the outside but felt like a prison on the inside. He wrote about being locked in his room for hours to reflect on his sins, about having to fast for days because he accidentally broke a vase his mother claimed had holy significance. And worst of all, he wrote about the time he begged her to let him skip a church retreat because he was being bullied by other boys there, and she slapped him across the face and told him, "Jesus carried a cross, and so will you." And the most disturbing entry, dated 3 days before the shooting, read, "She won't stop until I disappear, or she does." 90 more seconds in, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe now and share this video to make sure the truth isn't buried with Margaret Thornton. The community was torn, some clinging to the image of Margaret as a saint, others beginning to understand that the reality inside the Thornton house was far more complicated than they ever imagined. But no one defended Eli's actions, not even his own father, who spoke through tears at a vigil held days after the shooting, saying, "I lost my wife and my son on the same day, and I didn't see it coming. That's the part that kills me. The trial began 3 months later, and the courtroom was packed every single day, with reporters, neighbors, former classmates, and local church members all trying to understand how this quiet boy had turned violent in the most sacred of places. Eli pled not guilty by reason of insanity, and the defense brought forward pages from his journal, mental health evaluations, and a string of testimonies from teachers and therapists who had quietly raised red flags years earlier, but were ignored or dismissed by Margaret herself, who insisted Eli was simply possessed by temptation and needed more church time, not therapy. The prosecution argued that no matter what pain he'd suffered, Eli made a conscious, deadly choice that robbed a woman of her life and traumatized an entire community during one of its most sacred rituals. The jury deliberated for 11 hours before delivering a verdict that would stun the room. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not murder, citing long-term psychological abuse and mental illness as mitigating factors, and sentencing Eli to 15 years in a psychiatric facility with mandatory treatment and no chance of early release. 90 seconds gone again. If this story is affecting you, let us know in the comments, and please tap that like button so more people can find this video. Subscribe if you believe in bringing dark truths into the light and making sure justice is seen and heard even in the unlikeliest of places. In the aftermath of the sentencing, Everlight Baptist Church held a service of healing, with the entire congregation wearing white instead of black, and Pastor Wilkins said through tears, "We are not here to forget, we are here to forgive, to learn, and to be honest about the pain we ignored." A new stained glass window was installed in the sanctuary, with Margaret's name etched at the bottom, not just as a memorial, but as a reminder of the real cost of silence in families where love is demanded but not shown. Eli remains in treatment to this day, reportedly showing signs of progress and writing letters of apology to every person who witnessed the shooting, including a 6-year-old girl who dropped her crayon when the shot was fired and has been too afraid to return to church since. His letter read, "I took something from you that day, something you'll never get back. And I hope one day you'll find peace even if I never do. If you're still here, this is your moment to make a difference." Subscribe to our channel, hit the bell so you never miss these real, heartbreaking stories, and share this video to raise awareness for children suffering in silence behind perfect doors with polished smiles, because sometimes the greatest tragedies happen where we least expect them, and only the truth can set the next child free. Justice was served not just in the courtroom, but in the community's reckoning, in their refusal to keep pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. And though Margaret is gone and Eli will never live free, the story lives on in sermons, in whispered prayers, and in the eyes of a town that now knows peace doesn't come from hiding the truth, but from facing it, forgiving it, and never letting it happen again.